Welcome everyone to Epoch Philosophy, just in podcast form. Thanks to everyone who supports this podcast and our YouTube channel on Patreon in the YouTube member section. Couldn't do any of this without you. If you want to ensure that our YouTube channel and podcast survives, consider pledging just a couple dollars a month. It's the only thing that ensures that we survive and can keep making content. Some clarification before the podcast. This has been recorded in the past via a live stream I had on YouTube, and I figured I would upload these as to breathe new life to them and introduce them into more audiences. So if my audio sounds a little bit different than normal, this is why this has been recorded in the past. So without further ado, thank you guys for being here and enjoy the podcast.
And I set my Twitter up as that for a promotion for that YouTube channel.
Gotcha. I apologize.
I just kind of go by Faraday, but you can call me Caleb or Faraday on YouTube.
All right, gotcha. I apologize, Caleb. I was actually muted. Guys, I'm sorry. I was muted, but yeah, we're here with Caleb Cain. I was actually asking him about his his Twitter tag. His online sort of name is Faraday Speaks. If you wanted to say that again, you said, Caleb, you said Faraday Speaks is just sort of like your online name, right?
Yeah, so Faraday Speaks is my online name that I set up for my YouTube. And so I go by Caleb, but my I'm also a public figure, my identity. So my full name's out there online, so anybody can call me Caleb or Faraday.
Gotcha. Perfect. So I actually, the first time I saw you were on Sam Cedar on the Majority Report. And then I didn't realize this, dude. You were on CNN, and then you were on the New York Times did an article about you. I was reading it. I was also on PBS, and I was also on a big podcast called The Rabbit Hole. I don't even say those things to brag. I actually hate every single piece of media I've ever been in. Really?
Rabbit Hole podcast. Well, I will say this: the editors on Rabbit Hole podcast, and I don't even. By the way, I don't blame any of the journalists or anybody. I think we'll get into this. I think there's dynamics that create these things. But on the Rabbit Hole podcast, if anybody would like to experience what it was like to maybe first get sucked into something and kind of lose your identity and become someone new, the first 3 episodes, the editing, they did such a beautiful job, and it really does make you feel the experience of going through that world. When I listened to that podcast, I felt myself back in that room, in that bed, watching those videos. So if you want to ask me questions about some of that stuff, but maybe we could just speed through some of my past stuff to get into some of the more topical stuff. But yeah,
sure, yeah. And I'm sure a few people here are kind of familiar, but for people who aren't, kind of give if you want a little bit of a lowdown on your sort of past regarding the alt-right and radicalization.
Yeah, and I don't mean to just speed through, because I know if you have any questions you want to ask me about, absolutely. But in terms of just the timeline of it to get through it, if anybody would like to know more specifically anything that Ian doesn't ask, you can contact me, or you can go watch my YouTube channel. Honestly, I would just go watch the Rabbit Hole podcast. I think that gives a good overview. But basically, I grew up in Appalachia in West Virginia. I grew up predominantly white area with a town next over that had a lot of black people in it. So that was my cultural exposures. So basically, all of us were lower class, white or black. And then there was some, middle class people there. My family basically insulated me pretty well when I was young. I got games and got to enjoy all the same culture everybody else did. But some of my other friends, they were a lot more poor. And they played games too, because they'd still get a game here and there because their mom worked an extra hour, or maybe they borrow a game from their friend, or they go to their friend's house and play games. But for the most part, there was a lot of haves and have-nots. And I remember going to my one friend's house, and he would get every game on Christmas. If GameCube came out, he'd get the whole top bestseller lineup for that season, Mm-hmm. And I say all that to say that this stuff was going on in my life, and I didn't really ever think too much about it, because I just thought that I had enough. and I had like everything was being taken care of for me and being done for me. But then like when I started getting older and I started to have to be more independent, you know, you're not a child anymore. And not only do you have to be more independent, you want to be more independent. And as that started happening, I had a lot of conflict with my family. You know, they were very religious, a lot of problems there. There were certain families, well, I would say my entire family had intense prejudice towards people of color, but there were, or a certain prejudice. There were certain people in my family that had like a very intense racism that I would fight with. You know, it was kind of that. So it was like I don't even like it putting in these terms. I don't think these terms mean shit, but poor reactionary, you know, lower class. And I don't know, had really bad relationship with my family. In high school, I'd get into all sorts of weird stuff. Like, I don't know if you had the experience. How old are you, by the way, Ian?
I'm 23.
23.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how old are you? I'm not sure.
28. I just turned 28. 28 February. Yeah, I'm Aquarius.
All right.
Apparently. I can't remember my moon sign though, if anybody's into that. But you know, you get older. I didn't like being around my family. I just didn't really fit in well with them. And we would fight over all this like surface level belief bullshit, you know? And so I go to school and I just want to hang out with my friends. I wouldn't do anything. And then I come home and I just go down like weird rabbit holes on YouTube. Because like back in like 2007, 2008, if you were a teenager at that time, if you were at that like sweet spot age, you know, to like run up in a school or fucking join a gang or fucking whatever, around that time, you know, I'd sit around and I'd watch videos. And honestly, I would say those videos back then radicalized me, now that I'm looking back on it.
Really?
Those videos, yeah, my radicalization started back then. And I have a different idea about radicalization now than I used to have. What most people mean by radicalization is you're not a liberal.
Sure.
Even when leftists say that to you.
Sure.
When a leftist tells you that, they're telling you that you're not a liberal. And what liberalism is not to essentialize things. Want a preface to your audience. Don't take anything I say for truth. Take it as bullshit for your own doings. These are things that I think about, either hear or read and kind of come to. So we're not trying to, I don't want to essentialize anything in what I say, and I don't want to generalize or over exaggerate, but I will come off that. So, Ian, help me out here. I've got ADC. Where was I just then?
So you were talking about what liberalization is, or what?
Yeah. So like liberalization is a de-radicalization project. It's a way to take human conflict and take politics and de-radicalize it, to find a different solution to politics. Politics, to me, it's not even just class struggle. It's just when two opposing forces are in conflict with each other in the environment, right? And, you know, I think that for me, when you say, well, what do you mean? Because you're not under threat. I think that those videos radicalized me, because the thing that we're under threat now, and, you know, the thing that caused me to be depressed and cut off from my family, the thing that caused me to have to go to college to like chase some career in life and leave all my friends behind who supported me, and all my friends had to do the same. We didn't want to separate when we were in high school. Our parents all told us we had to.
Gotcha.
And we had these like drives, you know, like, oh, I want to go do this, I want to go do that. And we also wanted to not be in our hometown. But I'm sure if me and my friends could have all been together and there would have been a way to do that, we would have chose that in high school.
Sure. So a lot of your childhood was sort of maybe the best way to put it and sum it up was, it was a sort of alienating sort of experience whenever you were a kid. There wasn't a lot of purpose. You're kind of at odds with some of your family members, perhaps at odds with your community. And then you also had the external influence of something like YouTube, stuff like that. So it was maybe perhaps the best way to put it. You were in a kind of a confused postmodern state, something that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like the religion that I had that was being given to me, I could tell it was bullshit because I could look right over the corner and say, you all are using that to control me and tell me I'm going to hell. but I like got on the internet. And also I talked to the guy at school. And also you guys told me that Santa Claus was real and I found the present.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I found myself in an alienated postmodern state, definitionally, like very explicitly in your language there, by the way. And I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
And I think that what happened was I went online and first I found atheism content. What is atheism? It's to me, it's like Zizek says, you know, you start to put on the glasses. Now, of course, I have this theory that like because of human imagination and because the threat analysis is so screwed up, that sometimes people put on the glasses, but the glasses, like maybe some of the pole, you know, the filtering is scratched or something. The glass has been scratched by ideology. So you put on the glasses and you see a part of the truth, but because you're so dead set on, I know reality now, I've seen it the way it is, and I know what's wrong with it, I'm going to go out and change it. You do horrible things. You do awful things. You do things that you try to rearrange society. You do things like you try to have revolutionary movements. You do things where you try to organize and control society and direct society if you're already in control of it. And you get segmented away from everybody. And that's what I think corruption is. And I think that I lived in a corrupt society in which the locals around me had no power. I had been disconnected. We were a people that had been oppressed for a long ass time. Appalachians were basically the biomass of the Yankees and the Union up north. And then when they were done with them in their factories and they could get, you know, cheap slave labor or whatever they needed, they just threw those people had to leave. There was no more jobs. Either they got chased out, or if they tried to unionize, they got chased out. So they went down in Appalachia. And then they had to fight the same goddamn battle there at the coal mine.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's quite literally and figuratively, like I say literally because that's what actually happens, is a dumping ground of all kinds of weird stuff, you know? Like, I mean, even, what was that movie, Dark Waters? Is that right? About, was that DuPont chemical that was doing that? But
go on and talk about that a bit.
Yeah, no, essentially, I don't exactly know what it was. Actually, I was quite surprised. I didn't expect it to be actually a very good movie. It was quite good, but it's about you know, what was it? I think DuPont was dumping. Was it a Teflon-like chemical or something used in pans that's extremely toxic? And I mean, I think it was at a town in West Virginia. You probably know where it is. People were like fucking losing their hair, or their teeth were turning a certain color. I believe. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's essentially it. But ultimately, like, yeah, West Virginia, there's a very material argument to be made that stuff like that you went through with this weird, confused state, subject to a lot of weird external pressures without having a lot of maybe perhaps internal grounding and stuff.
Yeah. So by the way, what you're talking about, that lawsuit took there was a 2-decade legal battle. And it only got done in 2019. So that chemical dumping, I don't expect anyone in your audience to be too surprised, but everybody should be surprised when they tell you that they are not poisoning you and they are not fucking your life over and that they have your best interests. This shit was happening in 2000s. This shit was happening in the 80s and 90s, and they were dumping so let me go back. It was for decades, DuPont dumped PFAS, which is your Teflon material, into the Ohio River in West Virginia, killing farm animals and poisoning the water surrounding communities. And the contamination in Parkersburg and subsequent lawsuit were the subject of an acclaimed feature film. So, yeah, I used to live near Parkersburg, and that's where the University of West Virginia is, West Virginia University, in Morgantown. And yeah, I know a reporter over there was covering that, and it's awful. And everything that you would say, that people might, the same types of things that people might say to the black community, you know, there's shootings, or you're saying there's this, but the way you're telling us, it sounds like a big bunch of bullshit.
Right.
And maybe when someone's in a oppressed state and they cry out in such a shrill way, and maybe they do say some bullshit. But here's the thing, they don't know what the fuck's happening to them. And when people do cry out, and then people don't listen. But they were literally like I've talked to my reporter friend and went around and interviewed, and yeah, those horrible stories, which you might try to think are exaggerated, they're true. Like everything you said is like the least of it.
Right.
It was horrible. And it's like within a a couple decades that we had mass media, and it took that movie just recently, So people don't realize that we've constructed environments. And I think what happened to me was I've been in a postmodern simulated constructed environment, not out of any maliciousness, but just, and this is where I'd like to start asking you questions once we get into it, but dropped into this, disconnected from any other of the types of people that would have been, compatible to help me move through life. I need someone next to me that's like a talker. I need someone next to me that's like a communicator. I need someone next to me that's good at like solving linear problems, right?
Right.
And I didn't have any of those things. And I kind of had it for a little bit in high school, but then we were all separated again. And then, you just, you go out into the world and you're told that you can compete and win. But the ways that people are competing and winning is corporations are using personality tests. They're using IQ scores. They're using all sorts of different metrics. They're using cultural metrics. They're using demographics, psychographics, and they're building these little like diverse teams.
Right.
And these diverse teams are like fucking decked out raid guilds. And they've got all the best gear and they're running around the map, siphoning up everything. And they think that they can fix it by like just dropping coins or just by redistributing the money. But it's like I see it as a whole economic system. It's a distortion. We've gotten away from something. And I think that's, we have mental illness now. And I experienced it. And when I would go online and look at YouTube videos, the problem was there's no good information. There's lots of quote unquote red pills online, but they're always like, the truth is so hard to find. Like you find one person who tells you one part of the truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll even hear like, crazy people, like people, or it's comedians, or it's like some revolutionary. But if you go on the internet and you always like hear, I got into cycles of, for one cycle, I listened to Charles Manson, and I would just listen to him and hear things he had to say. For one cycle, I got into Levian Satanism and go through that. Then you get into atheism. Then you get into like, I would go through Illuminati conspiracy stuff, New Age stuff. In high school, I would never really stick with any of it. I would just like jump around and look at stuff because I was bored.
Right.
And I wanted to learn about the world. And every time I did, like each one of these sources were telling me that like, everything's wrong. You live in something fake. You got to get out of it. But what happened when I noticed, what I'm looking back on, and especially after the alt-right, and even after going into the left, and even after looking at liberals, I realized that they're all got blinders on, and they've got blinders on because they see different parts of the truth. And the truth is like this 3D object, and there's a light above it, and it casts a 2D shape.
Right.
And the truth changes because the truth is the environment which is applying pressures to us.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, actually. I was going to say that, like, in many ways, sort of I think our institutions and the world around us is still pretty reflective of sort of maybe like an Anglophonic sort of Enlightenment liberal tonality, and that tonality sort of posits it creates sort of a linear idea of truth, right? And like you said, that was a really good metaphor. It's a 3D truth is something 3D. It's something almost atmospheric, and the light casts down a 2D shadow, and our perceptions are by default just sort of insufficient in a lot of ways of really pinning it down exactly what it is. Like we see glimmers of it, perhaps, and that's a really good way to put it. And there are sort of ideological perspectives in liberalism and maybe like Marxism, socialism, whatever ideologies at base sort of have these glimmers, and the truth is hard to pin down within any set of ideological parameters, right? And it creates the state that probably allowed you to get sort of sucked into really weird alt-right stuff.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Because what happens? You go to the alt-right, and they will tell you things. They'll point to you things that are happening, and they're seeing things from their perspective. The problem is, so I've got this idea, this like kind of a meta theory. It's just a model to help me like think about this and explore these ideas. It's this meta theory that like people have different types of shapes, and like your shape isn't static. You can shape shift a bit, but like your shape is to a degree static. Your shape is like basically it's your brain pattern, and it's your personality, and it's your way of learning. It's the type of intelligence that you have and that you are. And so you have this shape, and that shape looks at the environment and it brings in a perspective. Again, it sees that 2D shadow. But then like what happens is if the shape is disconnected from others, which would help it come to a consensus. And by the way, you could still have the complete toolbox and still come to a bad consensus, because I realized the reason that like all the talk of simulations is because the reason things get simulated is because that's how we reproduce, but it's especially how we reproduce information. But because of our brains, we reproduce information and we simulate things, and then we try to simulate something and then apply it to the environment, meaning we try to optimize the environment based on the simulation that we have.
Right.
But if it's true that we all have different skills, experiences, and shapes, and by the way, one might ask, well, how does this work? Well, as more people enter into a biome together, into an ecosystem, and especially an information ecosystem together, the environment pressures have now shifted and changed. And so now those people are seeing a part of the environment that you're not seeing. You have to go to the tribe across the valley that you've now connected with and ask them, what are you seeing? Because the whole dynamics changed. The politics has been created, power differentials have been shifted around, threats have been thrown up. And if everybody goes into a hyper reality of ideology, they might fuck up their threat detection.
Yeah.
Furthermore, if we segment society to where we have a priest class and a warrior class and a worker class and a this class and a that class, what happens, you're right, if not only the basis of the ideology causes us to further segment, segregate, and replace people, but what if that's happening also because the types of people that are in those positions, the types of people that are the elites running the show, making those decisions, or at the very least doing the work to centralize energy and power and productivity, right? Mm-hmm. To pull it closer. What if the way that they're setting up the world is it's insufficient, it's incomplete, and what they're actually doing is they're simulating the world, and as they simulate it, they are gobbling things up and they're replacing it. My friend told me an example of this. He said there's a sci-fi book, and it's called Rainbow's End. And in Rainbow's End, there's this, it's about a technological singularity. But at some point in the book, they take a novel. And this novel has like all this ancient knowledge on it that like all the people have been putting together for years. And they're like, well, we see this knowledge, but we read it, but it doesn't seem, it doesn't seem to get us what we want. So, but there must be something here because the ancients must have known something. So here's what we're going to do. They take the book and they want to analyze it, but in order to analyze it, they have to put it into a spectrometer. And to do that, they throw it into a shredder. And the shredder, it shreds up the book and it throws all the pieces up in the air, and then a camera flashes and lasers shoot, and it captures all the pieces individualized. And then it throws that into a AI machine, which then analyzes all those pieces and then comes to a conclusion on what to do about the problem. But the problem is that one type of shape and one type of intention and one ideology and one motivation, or at the least all those things which were flowing in a particular pattern for whatever reason, those were the things that developed the whole process in the machine. And you didn't learn anything. You simulated all that knowledge. You're going to go out and simulate it and create something false that's not going to work, that's going to be less hospitable to life. And you fucking destroyed the knowledge. It's gone now.
Right. I find that something like you're talking about is something present, and even things that are the most critical, right? So even ideology such as, sort of like maybe say, I find this a lot with something like Marxism. I've been on a pretty big kick with reading Marx lately, and the more I read, and the more I play. Like, I just recently made a video on the German ideology. It's our last video, which is actually a set of manuscripts by Marx and Engels. The more I read, the more I understand how insanely sort of like hyper real the online sphere is about ideologies such as Marxism, about other forms of critical thought. And it creates this sort of, it does create a sort of hyper real state. And looking at trying to pin down exactly what is within any set of narrow ideological parameters, it gets away from what you're trying to do. And it seems almost impossible. Rather, my idea personally that I've talked about a lot on here is that it's not that you shouldn't read or take any of these sort of ideological parameters seriously, right? I like to view ideology as something like that. It's just a set confines that you can view something through. It's a lens, it's a tool. And if that is the case, then we should be super pluralistic with those tools, and we should maybe perhaps not subscribe to them by default, right? Their ideology they're not equal by default, but maybe perhaps use them in a toolbox to look at things. Because like you said, like when you do, in a way, it doesn't matter really what it is. When you do take it to heart too much, when you take ideology to heart too much and you're not completely critical about it, you do the exact opposite of what your entire goal is, right?
Yep. You get, so I have this idea that what I call this, and if any of you motherfuckers steal it, if you patent it, you better give it away for free. All right. Don't fucking, and that's another thing I learned. Never fucking give in to the machine. Never give in. That doesn't mean go out and firebomb. That doesn't mean go crazy. That's what it wants you to do. It wants to target, it wants to label you as a terrorist, as a reactionary.
Yes.
The system wants to label you as a dissident and an enemy, and then it wants to genocide you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even do that because it's in a Illuminati sense. It does that because when the reason you're becoming angry and marginalized is because you're less economically viable. And as you become less economically viable, you're less competitive in the ecosystem. You are living in a vacuum, my friend. You're in a vacuum.
Yeah.
You're losing, you're gasping for air. It doesn't matter how many welfare programs they build, and it doesn't matter how much money they give you, and it doesn't matter how many times they overthrow the bourgeoisie. They're optimizing an environment for you, friend, and you're not going to be in it.
That's a really good point. I think I had a stream. I'm sure you're familiar with his work, but Plastic Pills, absolutely fucking wonderful. I love that dude. He is way more intelligent than what he'd ever let on. He's a super humble. I feel like I have a little bit of a. I think he grew up sort of, I think when I was talking to him in rural Canada, and growing up in sort of like a ruralish Midwest, I can kind of relate to him in a lot of ways. He's very humble. He's he's not going to talk about how smart he is, but he says some of the most smart shit when you get him to open up. And he was on stream recently, and he doesn't talk about politics. He doesn't talk about any of this, but I got him to open up. And essentially, just footnotes, our entire discourse around politics at large, especially online, is so radically insufficient that I think in a lot of ways, like the one thing we need to worry about is creativity. Like we need to worry about trying to find ways to adapt in a lot of ways. Because I think the more you analyze reality, like you were talking about like these weird hyper real sort of perspectives that everyone has. Well, what is that other than an indicator that reality at large is very hard to pin down? And if it is very hard to pin down, we have to be really creative with our approaches. And that involves going outside of initial sort of ideological thought, right? It requires a population of people to be creative, and we do not see that, especially online. Like that is something that does not happen, right? When people read Lenin or they read Marx, they look at it as like a Bible first, and that's a big problem, because one thing, it's hard enough to get people to read some work. And then when they commit to reading a work, by definition, they're going to take it seriously. I notice that's how it is with a lot of people. They don't necessarily do that online. It's weird. Online, when they read about something, they're a little bit more skeptical. But when they actually read a primary text, for some weird reason, I notice people aren't quite as critical.
No.
And it's like what happens is when they get to actual reading primary text, it's like they have their position, and then they're going to learn more about that position and learn or essentially try to create an environment where they can essentially make better arguments for their position. And that's like, what is that other than like peak rationalization, right? It's like saying, I have the answers and I'm going to search for those. I'm going to search for those explanations.
Well, think about where it happens. It happens in these goofy fucking philosophy departments, goofy fucking humanities department. And guess what? It's happening goofy in the science department too. There's a split there. So so let's not pick too much fun. Although postmodernism does make it fucking weird. You can just it's like crack for your brain's fucking simulacra machine. It's like, oh, let's go, fucking hit the gas, you know? But like, think about it. You got all these dudes in there, right? Yeah. And like, it's not even about are they politically the same. They look at problems. They have a hammer, they see a nail. They have a hammer, they see a nail. If they go down to the people, this is why I think people like Socrates and all them, I think this is why people like that actually make real discoveries, and why kids and fucking philosophy fucking like departments never do anything but like build upon crap and make the world worse. The reason why people have epiphanies and breakthroughs like Socrates, that motherfucker was talking to everybody.
Yeah.
He was out talking to everybody, and he was asking them questions. And I think what happens is he was collecting experiences. He was collecting imprints from all the shapes. And then his hyperactive little fucking ADHD brain, his little distributed brain, had an epiphany one day. And then he came down and told everybody, and he started running his mouth too much. And then they fucking killed his ass.
Yeah, well, and isn't there something really interesting there too that I find, and I'm sure you relate to, everything by default today as politics that are by default anti-status quo, and honestly, like it's I want to be careful here because anti-status quo politics by definition in my mind is good. It's something by definition not good by definition, but I think any real critical insight around what's going on, it's natural to come to a conclusion that shit, we really need to change the core structure of a lot of things. But there's something that happens, right? There's natural antagonisms that comes through that, comes through that. Well, yeah, I said that right. Sometimes I can't talk. But anyways, we've lost, I think Matt Christman from Chapo Trap House, actually really, the dude, I don't watch Chapo Trap House, and a lot of their audience absolutely kills me on Twitter. They are some of the most brain dead people, but he is actually an incredibly smart and insightful dude. I don't understand how he has the audience that he has, because he says really significant things.
Well, because here's the thing though, I just want to interrupt. How many people understand what Zizek's trying to say?
Right.
You know what I mean?
No, yeah, none. Big fucking net zero.
I didn't get it. I did not get the ideology thing until very recently.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry, continue.
No. Yeah. So, Matt Christman has said, he was like, look, throughout this weird internet digital sphere of politics that has rightfully came to a lot of really good conclusions around the political economy, right? Politicians are corrupt. We've been able to learn about these things in a really positive way, but we've lost the love. And what is something like Socrates going out and talking to people other than a sort of love for not only like just like people around him, but for the love of like the process of like what's going on. Like he cared very immensely, and that's not something that and to make creative processes and politics, to make true sort of newer foundations of thought, you can't do it with anything other than that, I think. And that's kind of a working thesis that I have. It sounds corny, but like, no. Yeah, but like we lost the love somewhere, and it needs to come back.
Okay, I'm going to prove this to your audience, okay? I'm going to prove this to your audience. Can I make my case?
Yeah, of course.
All right, so first of all, the reason that I was able to do this, the only reason I'm able to do this, I have a fucking hyperactive brain. I cannot fucking sleep. I literally can't even fucking sleep in, because like if I've got something in my head, if I'm hyper-focusing on something, I can't sleep. I got to get up. I got to write it down. Even if it's not important, I got to write it down. I don't know why. I have like this like fucking Donnie Darko fucking like orb coming out of my chest.
Dude, this is a total, like, I gotta say, this is a total different Caleb Cain than I ever saw on like CNN or fucking New York Times. No, dude, this is
Caleb Cain back then was like, he was still in the cave. He thought he came out of the cave and he was still down in there. They just fucking, apparently they got different rooms motherfucker. And like, they got the shadow room, then they got the paint room, then they got the goddamn 3D technical fucking they got the ideology room. Now they're building a virtual reality room next, dude. And that one, I don't know if people are going to get out of that one.
Yeah.
But here's where set me back on my track, please.
Shit, I don't know where we were. This is
talking. No, it's fine. We both got like the same like type of brain or whatever. I've got the ADHD really bad. Okay, yeah. I remember now. So we're proving why we need to like think about what you described, this love, right? This play, right? So I fucking have spent the past really ever, but really intensely the past 2 years, because the past 2 years I haven't had to work a job. And the past 2 years, I worked, I was working at a university for a little while.
Okay.
But the other times I would either stay with family or someplace. I'd fucking the past 2 years, I found some way to weasel my way into some Socrates situation where I ain't got to work. You know?
All right. Yeah.
I find some way to be a bum. I found some way to be a bum the past 2 years, or to find work that was, tangential to what I was doing. And then I spent all of my time talking to people. I spent all my time watching videos. And not just watching, like, see, I think one problem people make when they go to learn things is they think, oh, I need to get an education. So, okay, I guess I got to go learn the political philosophy. I'll go down that track, and then I'll learn, I got to find the track. And then, and then when I go into the track, there's an ideology inside the track. Like Neil deGrasse Tyson told me not to listen to that guy over there because he's a crackpot and he talked about astrology.
Right.
So I guess I can't talk to that guy. So I'll never look at that guy. I'll never listen to what he has to say. And we'll just keep going this direction. And meanwhile, astrology guy over there actually has figured out something cool. He's actually figured out some shit that fucking gravity affects fucking brain development in the fucking womb. But you're not even listening to him because it sounds like some hokey bullshit.
Yeah.
Right. And so you just keep going down your track. But I don't do that. First of all, I don't learn that way, and I never got educated. I never got indoctrinated completely. I kind of did. I tried to indoctrinate myself. Like, I need to be able to sit down and do linear tasks. But really, I didn't pay attention in school. I put my fucking head down the whole time. They tried to indoctrinate me, and I didn't listen.
Well, that's sort of that's kind of a problem, right? And what happens is you do get these weird political infotainment things, especially right-wing ones, where they say, university is some liberal indoctrination center, and in many ways it sort of is, but in different way, obviously way radically different ways than any right-wing or whatever say. It sort of is. It's more of a. I think one of the biggest things with university, the problem specifically with the sort of approaches that they take, is it seems to be a very radical identitarian thing, rather in weird ways that further atomizes society, right? So you're in a lot of ways, Zizek has talked about this. And he rightfully points out, and in a non-reactionary way, we can be critical about this while not absolutely denying their humanity, but sort of like the creation of a new realm of sort of LGBTQ plus communities that have actually been co-opted by the system at large. And what that does is it sort of does atomize people down into, raw individuals where they see first that they're separate rather than that they're similar, rather than there's sort of this unit, there's a unity, right? And that does create weird antagonisms. And university does not do a lot in addressing or being critical of a very identitarian approach to politics or even education in a lot of ways, right? Everyone's radically separate. And this isn't to deny, right? People who point this out, this isn't to deny that people don't have identities, that individuality doesn't exist. Absolutely. No, I think it does. But I think that this is a really interesting approach that university has failed. And honestly, though, I I almost don't care, right? You know, like right wingers will say a lot of the times that it's like, oh, it's this huge, like, devastating blow to Western civilization. Motherfucker, a lot of what they're talking about were like very institutionalized ideas from people like Locke and individuality and property, right? I made a video. This you might find interesting, or your audience or people in here may find interesting. I made a video from Rousseau, a liberal Enlightenment philosopher, to Marx, and some of the similarities and some of the differences, and sort of how they got there throughout the philosophical canon. And what you sort of find is that there is this sort of individual, sort of posited essence about liberalism at large. It's hard. There is, again, I think you would agree, there is a sort of hyper reality of what liberalism online. Anything bad is just liberalism online. But one thing that
it's hard to talk about this stuff, right?
It is.
It's hard to. And one way that helped me get outside of that was by listening to everybody, because I started to see how they all were using the words.
Yeah, dude, there's nothing more that I hate than people calling other people libs. I fucking hate that, because it is the most stupid, dumb thing that you could do. And so I think with like what liberalism at least does do is it does create a very huge emphasis on an atomized individual, an individual themselves. And Marx and Engels, a lot of their project, you know, outside of just political organization or whatever, they made very real philosophical commentary on this, right? They merged from, they took a lot of Hegel's form, right? Hegel sort of believed in the individual can only be recognized through the community, right? There's a dialectic of recognition there. And Marx and Engels take the same form of it. They just say it's more than anything, rather than it being an idea, it's sort of a material reality. And that I think we haven't, our institutions don't reflect even Hegel at all. Like, I think people, when it comes to philosophy, they think it's something so radically different, but like our institutions, the realm around us, it's still reflective of like the 1600s, even a lot of like developmental 1500s sort of philosophy and political theory. It's not reflective of German idealism in the slightest. And so we're at this really, so I honestly, the fact that universities sort of put, or they sort of have this sort of ideological default line, it doesn't bother me that much, because it's like, I don't think the way universities are structured right now is to learn shit in a lot of ways. Not to say that it's not necessary. Everyone should go to university just because of job prospects and career goals. But it's so radically insufficient as it is to actually learn a lot of things, I find, unless you get into probably something like grad school, or you can actually do a little bit of research. I find the structure of classes themselves are kind of bad, like classroom structures and stuff.
Yeah, please cut me off if I go off on a tangent that's not like to address your point, but I think it's going to address your point. You know, and then I think it'll wrap it around back to the point I was making, is that what's going on when you say like, oh no, it's so embedded, you should go to grad school because you got to get a job and stuff. We're so trapped. It's not to call you out, but we're so trapped. Like, it's going to sound like a doomer, but honestly, I think I'm a bloomer. I don't believe in this system anymore. I do not believe in what we've constructed. I think it's a big, giant fake simulation. I think it's heading off a cliff. But like, if that's the case, then like, what do? Like, you can still do all the things that you're talking about, right?
Right.
If you're talking about taking education and making it about an exploratory process and a collaborative process, it's about letting you and me, you know, the two people that fucking spin out and come up with crazy ideas, and then have somebody else like integrate those ideas and work with them. And I wonder, like, the left and everything they're doing, I'm like, why don't you guys just go find some land that's in a space where you can survive? You develop a strategy based on that environment and the predictions you think that environment can make. You use your technology, but you don't allow yourself to get sucked into it. You figure out what are the threats of technology, what are the addictive elements. You find, like, how do people get addicted to drugs? How do people become marginalized, become radicalized into crime and terrorism? And I think that honestly, the answer to these things are by stepping the fuck out of the society. Ian, I think like this society, I think it's the mode of production which is leading to the segmentation, which is leading to all the problems that we're describing, which is leading to the institution siloing, where the math department hates the humanities department, and that is like the institution, the academic institution is like the most glaring example of it, because that's not political. It's not political. It's not political for one side to be talking about science, one side to be talking about math. You're not even talking about the same things. You're not even studying the same things. Why are you telling each other that the other doesn't know what they're talking about? Why? Right. That doesn't make sense. That's not political.
Well, I think what you're getting into is, which there is some deep irony with this, but when you argue about what our natural state is, right? The prior sort of, again, what our institutions reflect is that our natural state is sort of competition, right? There's market competition to reflect that in a society. That's how we construct our society. But really, when you get down to it, and I believe this wholeheartedly, it's something that Marx and Engels talked about a lot, and not just them. I say that, I point that out because this is something that the left actually, in reality, they don't really take seriously. But our natural state's more cooperation than it is competition. And so what's really funny is what you're talking about, what we're talking about here, is that Marxism sort of posits that position, yet online Marxists are the exact opposite. This is why I say a lot of online Marxists are the unironic liberals, and that there's this natural antagonisms where you have your team, and then you pick your enemy, and those are your enemies, and that is your entire focus. So maybe I wouldn't go as far as to use that we need to step outside of society completely. But I mean that's good, right?
Well, here. Yeah. No, I think how I think you do it. I think you do it by you build a counterculture, but you don't build a counterculture which seeks to go in and somehow attack the superstructure. The superstructure is, and here's another place where the lefties go wrong, is I think that by the way, at the end of this, I want you to explain to me the Marx thing, because I saw someone write in chat and I don't really, maybe I have like come to something on my own, or maybe I picked it up somewhere, but I don't really have that connection drawn in my head. For me, Marxism has always been about the haves and the have-nots, the wealth.
So there's a contradiction there. That is true. There, especially towards the end of their sort of writing career, Engels especially sort of, and I think Marx did too. They grew a little bit more of a militant approach, and it makes sense because when you saw something like, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the Paris Commune, right, go wrong, and so I think what they did was, so I remember in a speech, I believe this was in a speech, Engels said that, like, listen, by default, the bourgeoisie is not your friend. Okay. So the bourgeoisie is not your friend. They are taking things away from you. Essentially, they're stripping your humanity. Thus, they are your enemy. We can't cooperate in any capacity.
Oh my God. So they created a hyper-real ideology to try to stop this acceleration.
Well, so what's really significant about that in my mind is when they wrote the German ideology, that was one of their earlier works. It was sort of the opposite. Not really, they weren't talking just about the bourgeoisie, but they did say human nature in many ways was cooperation. But obviously, the division of labor separates that, and the bourgeoisie, sort of the institutions at bay, separate that. But I think they did focus a lot more on cooperation rather than militantism towards the end of their sort of writing career. I noticed that it changed a little bit, and in my mind, probably, absolutely.
Yeah, they got blackpilled after they kept looking at this, and they're like, wait, so maybe that's what Marx saw. Maybe Marx saw that, like, the problem is they're dividing everybody up, and then it creates all these contradictions, which wouldn't have existed. Okay, so that creates all these contradictions. And then he like realized that, and he saw that like the money thing was happening, but like he didn't give a fuck about the money because like he was fucking in the factories too, making money. He was investing in stocks and shit. It's not like he was like, money's a sin. That's some fucking Christian bullshit.
Right.
So he was like trying to explain that, but then after a while, he just like was like he couldn't think of a way to correct it because he wanted to try to fix it, and so he tried to fix it from oh my God, Marx kind of tried to fix the system from within in a way.
Well, so actually, I'm not. I don't know if I would quite. I don't know if I would quite go there. They do. Marx does talk about pretty explicitly that that if you are going to change society at large, even in their early thought, it does require an absolute overthrow of society.
Well, no, I guess, but in that, but here's sorry, my train of thought. Here's why I had that train of thought.
Okay.
So in that context, they wouldn't have been able to do that because there was no alternative. Like, there's no other place to go. You can't just go form. You'd be out in the woods.
Right.
But we're in a weird context now, Ian, where we actually have access to resources and kind of like technologies that would allow us, as things fall apart, which they are going to, like, to build societies on our own. Like, they're kind of maybe things will get so bad that, and if we're ready and we prepare and we build out like little, we maybe could build a patchwork commune system which preserves knowledge that we need to preserve, preserves technology that we need to preserve, and it averts a lot of this. Because I think all the Silicon Valley types, I think they're all going to like go into this Borg machine or something. I don't think that they're going to like hold on to their humanity. They all want to give it up. And I'm wondering if so maybe the alternative is kind of just let the whole thing fall apart. But as it falls apart, look for pockets where power is delocalizing because that land is no longer economically viable, because now processing and power and wealth, as we talk about it, is going to start coming from lithium. It's going to start coming from things that run silicon-based life forms. They're not going to care about food or water.
So, I may not be totally, I may not completely be quite there. It's hard to predict the future, right? I think Mump said in chat, we've always had societies to build our own. And that is true. I don't know if we will get to a point where there will be a pretty radical breakdown, or at least maybe not a breakdown for sure, but there's going to be a huge threat to our existing institutions. And that's going to come from things like climate change, automation, all kinds of things. Whether or not we'll totally just, I don't know what'll happen, but maybe, like you said, a communal form of society, a more structured, and in Marxist terminology, that's easy for people to comprehend. Maybe an actual true socialist society, right? One that is on a global sort of process to communism or whatever system that sort of those sort of ideas that are reflected of. I think this is where there's two things with Marx and Engels. There is a prescriptive politics of what we should do, and then there's a description, and sometimes they overlap and people don't separate these two. And a lot of what Marx and Engels talked about, where they use sort of historical materialism, the form and the sort of, they use it as a tool, an analysis, and dialectical materialism to make the conclusion that communism is inevitable. That sort of system, a moneyless, stateless, classless society, is inevitable. And whether it is inevitable or not, you can't concretely say that. They were pretty concretely like, it's going to happen. But I think I'm still kind of there, right? Like, I think that, like, to find a lot of the major problems and contradictions within our current system, I think I sort of agree that through those tools, and we can use more tools than just dialectical materialism, that, I think something like a communal system, in a way, is probably going to be the way of the future, where, we probably will posit a society that's a bit much more probably cooperative rather than competitive. And I think that's still probably the future. I don't know how it'll happen exactly. Like I said, climate change and automation will probably, I think it's going to make a pretty big difference. But I don't know exactly. We've had conversations on this channel. We've talked about things like democratic socialism. I think are probably the most realistic trajectory. I don't think we're going to have another Marxist-Leninist sort of revolution and then the same form of central planned economies in that context. In the prior historical context, we could have newer central economies, and I think we probably will, but I think it's going to be under radically different context.
Interesting.
But
I've got a sci-fi brain, so I like to think about it. And I think when you think of like that process, so kind of getting back a little bit, I think like Socrates and a lot of these types, this autodidactic thing, I saw someone put it in chat. I think that that type of learning is a creative learning. And I think that those are probably the types of people that would have seen patterns in the field that would have told people how to rearrange his crops. Now, it might have been a maniac like you or me, Ian, and we would have ran out there and told them this big idea, and they would have told us to, like, go the fuck home. But maybe somebody would have listened, right? And seeing that, like, allowing different people's types of brains and people's different types of personalities and different types of perspectives to all collaborate together, I think that's like what even gave us our advantages. I think that's how we developed our language. I think that's how we really got an advantage at this, is that at some point there was certain patterns that emerged that were compatible with each other. And the reason I believe that isn't because I've read it. A lot of my journey too has been experience. And I've been learning that, like, we really should be listening to our indigenous people, our people of color, our oppressed people, even our white oppressed people. We should be listening to all of our oppressed people because they are experiencing something, right? And what I have been experiencing my whole life, and as I've tried to, like, put people closer around me, I've realized that I can't just surround myself with just anybody. And it's not even if, like, oh, they're a criminal or not, or I can trust them or not. Like, I need a diversity of people around me. Like, there's different types of people that I need around me. And when they're all around me, my life, I feel like it's together and I feel like I can do things. And I always have this, like, there's this piece of me and it's like this God-shaped hole. And now I think what that God-shaped hole is it's really just, I miss, like, my people. For some reason, I can remember them. And maybe, I don't know, but I really miss them. I miss the people that are going to help me, like, communicate the things I need to communicate. I miss the people that are going to help me process my thoughts slower. I miss the people that are going to, like, console me and know how to talk me down from things when I'm going to spin off the rails. I miss people that are going to know how to organize things so they can help me organize my life so I can keep my apartment clean and do my email. Like, I miss all those people. I don't even know where they are anymore.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Well, we're very social. Where I think someone in chat said this, we're a social animal. And, again, a world that is reflective of a more competitive individual thing. That's not, it's harder to find sort of people who think along those lines. Right. We don't really think about people too often a lot of the times. Even people who are concerned about other people, just by way of living in a sort of system like this by default, you are conditioned not to sort of think along those lines. We are, and the best way to put it, I would consider us radical neoliberals, especially this generation. Although there is again, with that, there's arguably the biggest pushback against neoliberalism we've ever seen, especially with younger generations. But nonetheless, culturally and reality, how we operate, we are still neoliberals, right? We, especially with something like Instagram, right? It's sort of I like Mark Fisher when he says that neoliberalism, if anything, is the appearance of productivity more than anything. And what is sort of Instagram other than the appearance of having something, right? You take a picture next to a car that's not yours or something like that, and that's sort of the world that you are born into, and it will groom you in that way unless you really try to look outside those lines, and that can be hard,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I couldn't agree more. This whole journey, part of what's helped me get to this point and realize a lot of these things is listening to all those different shapes. I also noticed, though, that people they have more than just shapes. They have, like, colors. It's like paint. And, like, what I noticed is that people really like paint. They like to consume paint. They like to put on paint. They like to paint other people with stuff in their minds.
Yeah.
They really like paint. And this paint, like, they put it over top their shape. And again, shapes aren't totally static. You can, like, shape shift a little bit. You can kind of hybridize your shape a bit. But, like, this paint. And I'm wondering if, like,
if you're trying to, are you saying something like kind of like Deleuze's rhizome a little bit, like the?
I don't know. I see. The only reason I have even any grasp or insight into this at all is because you guys made your YouTube channels.
Oh, okay.
You guys, well, seriously, like, and I don't want to say, like, to tell your audience to go listen to everything you guys say, because honestly, you guys aren't seeing the full picture either.
Sure.
But what you guys did was and it's funny that because I watch Plastic Pills too, right? I started out with cuck philosophy,
right?
But honestly, there's a big barrier for cuck philosophy for me, and you know why? Because cuck, like, his shape isn't quite mine, the one that I learned from the most, and his paint is like a bit antagonistic to mine. Because cuck, I think he's upper class.
I think he is too.
And that's fine. That's fine. I'm learning there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But that just doesn't jive with me, man. You know, I don't vibe with that. But like, I vibe with you in plastic, and when I talked to you and you told me you were like, your background's like, oh, that makes so much sense. But like, I learned from you guys and I took a little piece of that. That's the only reason I got this far. I've not read anything.
Okay. That's fucking sick. That actually means quite a bit. I like that a lot. That's definitely the goal. And honestly, I think me and Pills are probably I think we're the only two that really are sort of doing what we do. I say me and Pills, I don't want to lump us together completely. We do things in a different tone, but and again, I was a fan of Pills kind of a little bit before I really started getting into making theory videos. I had a YouTube channel, but some of my earlier videos are a little bit more flexible topics, but I always really enjoyed Pills. And I think we're kind of the only ones that kind of do what we do. Try to make we try to try to respect our audience. I think we talked about this once, that our audience are way smarter than what other YouTube channels might like. No offense to them, I actually quite enjoy them, but like ContraPoints and Philosophy Tube, it's very watered down pop philosophy in a lot of ways. It's still good. I like both of them quite a bit, but they don't talk a lot about the core text at hand. And also, I think me and Pills in a lot of ways have sort of been disenfranchised with a lot of the commentary sort of end of things. Like, what do I think about this? What do I'll make an occasional video essay. I only have a couple, but most of my videos are descriptive around works of theory and describing things where people can come to their own sort of realization. They can connect the dots in their own way without my complete input on it. And that's super fucking important to me. And that means a lot, actually, that I've been able to actually like help you with that. That's actually fucking awesome.
Yeah. I don't mind that you had some ideological pain in there. Actually, now that you say that, it does make it easier because there's less. I'm getting better at just scanning the shapes, but it does make it, because then I don't have to like unpack all the bullshit like excuses you make. You know, It's fine to have like. I don't think everybody needs to like. Oh, now we all just gotta drop the act real quick.
Sure.
No, I think we need to start to learn, because that's going to be like a massive identity death, and then we're going to go like full on Shinrikyo and gas the subway stations. You know. We're going to turn into like Islamist terrorists. We're going to turn into fucking Nazis. I have a theory on that shit too. I don't want a massive identity death in which we spiral into crisis.
Yeah.
I want to exit the grief cycle and get into the next grief cycle through acceptance. And acceptance is by mixing pain.
All right.
So it's okay. I think it's okay for people to put their bias into things. But what I think is not okay is when they do this fucking debate bro thing.
Yes.
And I've noticed that, like, you want to know a glitch in the Matrix I noticed?
What's that?
And people can tell Vosh I said this. But Vosh has a contradiction, I believe, in his beliefs. Like, when Vosh goes to... So there's a problem with labor in Europe. And this is not a Nazi argument. There's a problem in labor where there's tons of refugees coming in from the third world. I don't like that term, but there's tons of refugees coming in for different reasons. And they're having trouble with the amount that are coming in. And right now, it seems to be under control. But if climate change goes, it's going to get worse. Well, either way, right now, it's hurting labor rights in that country. And yes, the rich should be spending. But the glitch in the Matrix isn't to try to sort out who's right or what the solution is in that situation, because I don't even fucking know. Those are all numbers and metrics which someone's going to have to deal with. But what's interesting is when Vaush argued against Eric Stryker, who brought up all these arguments so that he could justify his great replacement Nazi ideology and his Holocaust that he wants to do. When he argued with Eric Stryker, he used the same debate tactics and strategies and statistics from a neoliberal institution that Destiny used. And if I'm right about it, then it's a sort of like ideological blurring. Like, because Vaush watched Destiny. He learned he learned his whole thing from Destiny. He's not a liberal like Destiny. He supports, redistribution of wealth and doing something about class. But it was just that one thing, like, that he used that argument to, like, try to dismantle that complex situation. And it was the same, it was like a liberal argument. He was making an argument based on, like, well, we're going to import labor and that's going to increase, like, but that was a, like, capitalist liberal argument.
Well, Vaush does that. I think someone like Vaush, that's pretty. I think that's common. I believe. I think my chat. I don't watch a lot of Vaush. I think my chat has told me he's pretty much he gives the advice not to, like, read theory. I'm not
trashing Vaush. I actually get along with Vaush, actually. But have you talked to Vaush before? I've talked to Vaush privately before, and I've actually learned a lot from Vaush.
Gotcha.
I think that's it's a blind spot.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, I think someone like Vaush, I don't think if his idea is not to read theory, it's going to be a little bit hard for him to pin down sort of like Marxism and what it is, because it is often very different. Like, I know he's had some positions that are very contradictory, as do I, and that's okay. Sure. But he's very much he's definitely considers, the branding of his channel is definitely very Marxist, and I think that kind of rubs people wrong, because a lot of people who do actually read theory find that some of those positions, it doesn't make sense why he would brand himself as a heavy Marxist, because in a lot of ways he sort of is like a very progressive, and this is not bad by default. He's sort of a very progressive, very, very left-leaning liberal, and that's okay. But that's sort of what his position. Yeah, so there is sort of a little bit of that with Vaush. But I do agree. I absolutely do not like the debate brosphere. I don't know if I've talked about this a few times, but it's I talk about it a lot because holy shit, I had an actual personal experience with this. I went on, it's a very small channel, and I kind of partially say this because I want to promote the channel in a lot of ways. I want some of my audience to go over there because I think that they deserve it. They have an audience right now that are quite, in a lot of ways, really, really weirdly like ideological in a lot of ways, and quite bad. And I'll explain how and why. They were going to do a debate with someone. And they dropped out with a guy named Franco Analysis. He is also a sort of practical political commentator, and I think he falls under this banner of this, like, Jimmy Dore-ish, like, anti-ideological yet ironically ideological thing. Yes. Yeah, I think that's probably where he's at. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not going to speak too presciently on that. Because we couldn't even get down to the ideas in this sort of debate, and I stepped in essentially for the person that stepped out. I'm sorry, but my
ADHD just came out. Who were you debating again?
So it was on the Vanguard, is the YouTube channel, and
okay.
And it was a debate, but I didn't want to debate, and so what I did, but I didn't want to, like, when they asked me to come on, I didn't want to say no, because I was like, okay, what I'll do is I'm going to go on something that's a debate, and I'm going to purposefully not debate. I'm going to sort of try to put the position out there. And the debate question was, are the squad sellouts? And in my mind, that was the most stupid question. That is a very stupid political question that we were asking here, right? It doesn't matter if the squad is sellouts. They are, but if your definition of sellout is that they have to sacrifice, which was Franco Analysis's, they have to sacrifice their values when they get into office. Dude, that is every single politician in history in a society like this. It is by default, you have to do that. And so by, I think, asking that question, whether they're sellouts or not, is it's really, really, really narrow, and we're not getting at it. And so what I try to do is like, look, the question here is wrong. We need to be talking about what to do, actually, because by default, they are sellouts. Most people actually do know that they are sellouts. And I think that the sort of antagonistic sort of baseline for debate, it completely it turns into spectacle and entertainment. And I try to do the opposite, and I got death threats. Like I've never gotten death threats on the internet from like anything I've done before. I've gotten them before from the channel, but I've never, like, from a specific event on the internet, I got about 4 or 5 death threats between on Twitter and Instagram, and they were like, you're a sellout shill. I'm like, and then also a lot of people are like, you're defending the squad. And I'm like, I wasn't defending the squad at all. I was trying to say that the squad, quote unquote, representatives at large are just, they don't have power. That's you know, that's within the institutions at bay, right? It's within that's within capital. It's not within individual representatives. That power is within organizations that representatives do make up. So there is some nodes of power there, but it's not really significant to the point where we should be discussing whether they're sellouts or not. And it went horribly wrong, right? It went terribly wrong, and I was getting all kinds of shit about it. I'm sure you can go check the comment section of the video. It's quite bad. But and maybe I didn't do a good job of my position. I'm a bad rhetorician. So that's fair. But that was my thing. And in debates, it's bad. And I can only imagine an audience like Destiny's or even Vosh's. I don't think having an actual in-depth discussion. Maybe with someone like Vosh, it might be a little bit different, because I think Vosh sort of has this. Again, I think Vosh, he says he's Marxist, but he exists within multiple planes, so his audience may be a little bit more open to things. But I think a lot of streamers, there is no realm where you can have a discussion about these things, like an actual discussion, right? Where it's not turning into spectacle and WWE blood sports.
Well, it's ridiculous too. And also, I think it's killing us because, okay, for example, in this conversation here, there's things I said that you could clip out, probably go take off and paint me as some like Nazi or a right winger. I guarantee it. But the thing is, if someone actually has listened to the whole conversation, no, I could be completely wrong. Also, I could be wrong about Vosh. Maybe Vosh didn't make that argument from the IMF because he's just trying to filter down to the best argument so he can win the debate.
Sure.
Maybe Vosh actually has a rationalization for why he believes that to be the case. Maybe there's some blah, blah, blah. You know, he votes for AOC, so maybe he wants people, he really fought for the vote, so maybe he is some sort of reformist. Doesn't matter. Point is, like, people like Vosh, everybody. It's like why I did have a breath of fresh air watching your all's channel a little bit. And I think the reason, same thing with another channel called President Sunday. You guys are all actually pretty left wing, but then at the same time, because you guys don't get involved in culture war stuff, and I guess you're in school and you're like too busy with homework, but then you still like YouTube, and I guess because I didn't find you guys on the political side. I had to find Cuck Philosophy first before I got into your channel, or maybe it was Pill's channel first. There's another channel too. There's a little web of you philosophy channels, and you guys, the thing that I connected you all through is you all do actually talk about postmodernism. The only other people that talk about postmodern philosophy on the internet are Nazis.
Right.
Or esoteric fascist Nazis.
Correct.
So that's like the two places I go. I get to come to you guys, or I get to go listen to the esoteric Nazis, because Baudrillard is dead.
Yeah.
So but I mean, what I'm realizing is that because people, essentially what I'm saying is deplatforming is bullshit. We need to be platforming everything, but it needs to be happening not in these debate contexts, but it needs to be happening in these like public assemblies where everybody gets to talk and they share their experience and what they're thinking. And we have to have some sort of questioning process to get to what the words of what they're saying are, so we can all put on the glasses, so we can all see through each other's ideology and see what the message underneath is, and see which words we like and which ones we don't. And then we need to we're going to connect on a human level that way. Because this shape thing, we're really fucking lucky. I think it does have something to do with some fucking gravity, because luckily it seems like humans all across the world have similar shapes. We've got all different sorts of paint, but we've all got the similar shapes. So
Right.
you gotta let everybody talk in the room. You gotta let the Nazi talk. You gotta let the socialist talk. You gotta let the trans person talk. You gotta let the conservative talk. But you got to do it in the way that you got to do it in an environment that you were trying to set up. But what happened to you is you went in as this little like virus trying to take over this host cell, and the host cell realized that you were trying to pop the hyperreal bubble, and just like in Inception. The dream attacked you and stabbed you and tried to kill you, quite literally.
I think I was talking to Pills about this, and he said that what did you do whenever you went on there and you disrupted the idea of like a debate? You stopped their nut. You stopped their climax. Like that's exactly what you did. Like you're when you do things like this, you critique the form in which things are happening, right? Because we can debate, maybe in your terminology, right? A shape is the form, and then that paints the content. Perhaps if I'm using your language correctly.
The shape would be kind of like, so to me, it's like your brain. It's literally, I think of it as your brain. The shape is like sort of, it's like the personality of you, the essence of you that gets kind of formed. And we've done studies on this. They say that like kids' personalities get kind of formed at like, 2 or 3 or 4. And things and trauma can affect that. And, different things can affect that. But what if there's something else affecting that? What if there's some evolutionary process, some genetic process, some sort of force on the environment that we're not aware of that causes certain shapes to form, which then developed with each other, and then which developed strategies together? But when we start doing all this weird labor segmentation, it does weird things. But then also there's paint, so people can also associate and build and bond between each other with that. But paint is not a great way to pull people together. So that's why when you have these like social media silos and people get funneled into them, and they all believe in the same thing, but they're all miserable together. And it's because they're all the same shape. And that's why they are kind of being drawn to the types of things that they're being drawn to, because they're seeing things from that type of perspective. And we can't make sense of it because it's so information saturated, and we try to draw so many conclusions from paint that we don't really know if there's a meta level of consciousness going on. If there's some like animal brain directing behaviors, like a recommendation algorithm, if there's something else going on and we're not aware of it and we're not reacting with it, I think that's what things like trauma cycles are telling us. I think that's when we get into I think cognitive science is honestly starting to reveal a lot of it to us. And I've read a lot of that shit, and I think that's why it's coming into my head.
Interesting. Are you saying that maybe like ideology or political ways of looking at things, they're not adapting, and that can lead to sort of, if I'm thinking about this right, that can lead to sort of a pathology maybe?
Maybe the reason pathologies erupt, and maybe the reason that hyperrealities erupt, is because your human brain is layered in such a way, right? Maybe your personality comes from a deeper part of your brain. It could be anything. We're theorizing here, right?
Right.
And it's YouTube, so it's all bullshit. So don't worry. It's not real. It's all plastic.
Right.
But like maybe there is some sort of like everybody's got a certain type of hardware. But it's like you can't even think of it that way, because you see people's personalities can change, right? You can change your shape, but it's really hard, and you have relapses. But then like the paint would be all of the, imagine it like this, okay? Imagine it like this. Imagine it like a video game. You're in the Matrix. The source code running across the screen, that is just the shit that is the laws of nature. That is all the forces of your environment. Those are the things like that probably don't change, right? And then you've got other layers of programming, right? You've got your base layers, but then you've got layers that are more contingent and variable based on fluctuating pressures in the environment, right, and evolving and erupting pressures in the environment. So you get like a sort of like a series of like a meta layer of like if-then statements, right? Mm-hmm. And the human brain, because it's developing in this environment, it's adaptating and evolving into this ever-growing and evolving and information-saturating environment. And so it starts to grow layers onto its brain as like expansion passes to deal with the new adaptations which are emerging. And as that happens, they get more complicated, but also they get more schizophrenic because the bottom layers of the brain don't have a way to directly communicate with the top layers of the brain. And so what if there's like bottom layers of the brain that act like recommendation algorithms, that act like distributed networks, that act like maybe the things that we're replicating on the fucking screen are the things that are going on in sub-processes of our mind. That's a fucking possibility too. And if we've got a simulacra imagination machine running the whole show up front, then that could be the reason that like things are occurring the way they are. Why is it that technology seems to be another form of intelligence? Why is it that it seems to be turning into that? Like,
right.
that seems weird. That doesn't make any sense. But if we're replicating because we're replicating our own sort, like ourselves in some way, and we don't know it, that gets really weird and crazy there, right? But the point is like, that's like, if all of that is like even an inch of it's true, then we have to rethink. We've got to go back to cognitive science and figure out how we should be structuring things and looking at things, because we might just be trying to, what does education do? And what does like all these like schemes do? They try to take everybody and just fill them with paint and think they can just paint over all the issues. But like, what if the fundamental issue is they're not finding a place where these people's shape fit in? And the reason it's not happening is because they never ask anybody. They never ask you.
I think a little bit of what you're talking about is sort of some theory that has been described by people like Baudrillard, especially late Baudrillard, and maybe perhaps people like Frederick Jameson, and regarding like society, like late stage capitalism and postmodernism. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Jameson, but I think what we're talking about too is that, like, look, our institutions too reflect sort of object orientated ontology, is the way to put it. Or
what do you mean by that?
So it's object orientated, where it's like singular structures, atoms, and they're separate.
Okay.
They're separate, and so that's an ontology. That's a metaphysics, right? So Engels would call this Lockean metaphysics too, right? A metaphysics posited by people like John Locke and English philosophers, where everything's radically separate. And then someone like Hegel comes along and really tries to put the emphasis in a European context that no, things are dialectical and they're interconnected. And what happens is, what I've noticed is that our language is very much reflective of the sort of object-orientated ontology. It's reflective of sort of Lockean. There's many ways to describe this. Lockean substances, things that are separate, right? Like a chair is a chair, right? And it's always a chair. And then in a dialectical analysis, well, that chair isn't necessarily always a chair. It was wood once, it was a tree, and then it went through the process of becoming a chair after humans.
And each time there was a force meeting a force, there was a destruction, there was
And our language is reflective of the former, the English sort of way of viewing it. And I think what you're talking about too is our way of cognition is still reflected of this object-orientated ontology. And in today's world, it creates a schizo sort of state where these layers, as maybe what you were trying to talk about, can't communicate with each other because they end up becoming like they're lost through that translation, through the process or whatever. But I think what you're saying is kind of important, because it probably does posit a reality that is interconnected and continually processual, right? It's always going through a process, if you will. I think that's I think that's good. But this is a lot of what's been talked about with quote unquote. I don't really like this term because I don't think that's what postmodernism is. But postmodern philosophers who view things and critique things on the guise of postmodernism. I think that's a lot of what they talk about.
So I'll just wrap up the whole thing with this, and then I want to ask you a different question that like pivots somewhere else. So, crap, I probably just lost it. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is like, I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to move on from that because I just lost it. So this is completely off topic, but when I was looking at postmodernism, what are the different sections of it? Because it seems like I stumbled into Baudrillard and all that shit. And then there's like the shit that all like Rick Roderick, like that you'll run into in Rick Roderick lectures.
Right.
But then there's like all the stuff going on in like the humanities now.
Yeah,
and then there's like,
let me try to make this easy. You're trying to ask like, what the fuck is postmodern? It's hard to pin down, right? Is that what you're asking?
I understand. I've read that like there's not a pinned down definition, but I just like I don't have a map of it at all.
Sure, I can hopefully make this easy. So some people use postmodern or postmodernism as a philosophical category of thinkers. So like postmodernism is like pretty much philosophers or thinkers that are after modernity, right? And they also can't draw a line with this. When did that happen? Was that with Heidegger? Was the creation of postmodernism? Was Nietzsche? A lot of people say, I kind of would likely agree with this, Nietzsche was probably the first postmodern thinker, or but also we run into an issue. That's one way of categorizing postmodernism, but I like to look at postmodernism as a cultural logic, and that's kind of hard to explain for a second. So a lot of people who are postmodern philosophers to our prior definition, they're actually like people like Jordan Peterson say postmodernism is bad. Like it's an ideology. Postmodernism isn't a positive ideology. Like postmodernism, if anything, postmodern philosophers critique this new realm of postmodernism more than anything, right? And so I
actually get what he's trying to say, but I don't know why he says it that way. I think, well, one thing, Jordan Peterson has no fucking idea what he's talking about anything. He's never read it. He has no fucking idea whatsoever. If he did at least read a little bit, he would change his language immensely, because there's no one parroting postmodernism. I think if anything, the only way that his structure, his thought could make sense is if he was critiquing something like post-structuralism, which that is much different than postmodernism. But I like, and I'm very interested in postmodernism because, again, if Jameson, I like his definition the best. It is a cultural logic. It is a world that we are living in now. It's postmodernism. It's late stage capitalism, essentially, is his sort of thesis. Is that it creates, again, really confused state of malaise. History doesn't seem to be, it shows that it kind of breaks down the linearity of things, yet we're still stuck in a linear set of framework of thought, right? We think of everything linear. Our institutions are set up in that regard, but it's not, and we've recognized that it's not, and things are starting to rupture, and they're starting to change, and it creates this confusion. And I like that definition of postmodernism. It makes the most sense to me. You know what I think postmodernism is?
What's that?
Is this linear bullshit? It's bullshit. I used to sit there and think in school, like, man, this doesn't make no sense. You say it happened, and then you look and it's like, no, it didn't happen that way, because it's a giant hive mind. War, conflict, trade, all civilization, it's just a big hive mind. It happens distributively. I guess it happens linearly over a time scale, but do you know what that 3D model would look like? It wouldn't fit in a fucking book. You know?
Right.
And like, it's so narratively driven. And like, I think, like, to me, postmodernism, it feels like one massive case of DID.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And it seems like it's one massive case of collective amnesia and dissociative identity disorder, which is like producing bipolar and anxiety and depression and fuck.
That's so right.
Honestly, dude. And then like, this is like complete speculation. But those things emerge after the information explosion.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way to put it. I like that. And I was going to ask you, maybe we could segue into this. And honestly, dude, we can have this conversation all day long. And honestly, please. You'll have to come on again for sure. We'll have to do this again soon. But I was going to segue into, because I was curious. You're doing some online. You're doing some research, right, about online. Like, are you doing some actual academic research at an institution? Is that right?
So I was working at an institution, but I left there so that I can launch a startup called Future Freedom.
Okay.
And I co-founded that with my friend Kaylin Robinson and Samantha. And Samantha. So I was on YouTube getting radicalized, and so I've seen things from that perspective. Kaylin was producing documentaries and videos. Kaylin basically gave a facelift to the far right. He produced documentaries for Lauren Southern, Stefan Molyneux, Alex Jones. He did work for Rebel Media. He did work for Tommy Robinson. He basically became the little technical wizard lubrication that they use to accelerate their network.
Right.
And then Samantha was, she joined Identity Europa and was a interviewer. Like, she would onboard people into the movement and interview people. And yeah, so Kaylin was, basically the artistic vision for the far right. Samantha was a prolific organizer and activist within Identity Europa, within the far right, within the movements that would go on to do Charlottesville.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so we all came together, and we now are we have this website. It's called Future Freedom. And we want to, like, as kind of like we've been talking through here, cut through the bullshit and, like, start to look at each other. The way I'm looking at it for myself is start to look at each other as our shapes again and figure out how our paint mixes together. And to, like, give people back. I'm tired of, like, when people go, like, think they're getting de-radicalized or fixed. They just go down a destiny rabbit hole. They go down a ContraPoints rabbit hole. They go down a Voss rabbit hole. They go down to this rabbit hole, that, or I jump out of politics and then they go down some weird hobby rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And I'm sick of people, and I did it myself. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of people thinking that, like, in order to have a normal human life again, they've got to, like, jump through hoops and apologize to this person and that person and do this and that, and it's everybody. Everybody's in sin. Everybody has screwed up. And how can we get people their freedom of choice back? And it's really hard in a system like this, as we've been talking about here.
Right.
But I want people to have their freedom of choice back, to feel like they have a sense of themselves. They've asked themselves the questions that they need to ask themselves. Do you feel racist? Why? Examine that feeling. Do you hate this type of person? Why? Examine that feeling. Are you scared of this happening? Why? Let's examine that feeling. So finding a way to show people a way to get to that point.
Gotcha. So what are you guys planning on doing? How are you guys going to try to at least pull this project off? What's your guys' goal?
First goal, so that's the objective, right? The objective is to show people a new way and give them their freedom back, give them their freedom of mind and their freedom of choice back. Mm-hmm. The second of way, the goal, the immediate goal, is to first draw that path. For any movement to exist, a path has to be drawn. So we first draw that path, and we draw that by showing us and the lives that we're living now, and how we've moved on, and we've put on the glasses, and we ate the red pill, stepped out the matrix, whatever you want to call it. We're no longer falling for the bullshit, and we're going to be honest with ourselves about bullshit in the future. Mm-hmm. And so we want to set an example, and then so we're doing that, and then the project that we have to help show that it's a stories project. And so if you go to our website, futurefreedom.community, and you scroll down the page, there's some faces on there. And those faces are generated by an AI, because, again, I love the spectacle. Love the spectacle. It's wonderful. You got to play with it, right?
Right.
So these, like, AI-generated faces and cool effects, and then when you click on them, it's a person's bio and their story. And so we've anonymized them. You can see, like, kind of who they are and where they've come from, but you don't, their identity's protected. We give them a name, and then we allow them to tell their story. And they've got, like, spaced it to, like, 1,000-word story. And right now we're targeting people that were in the alt-right, but I want to branch out eventually. I want to branch out and start getting everybody's story about how they all started to, like, I liked what you said earlier, is that we can't, like, ignore the paint, right? We can't all be colorblind, right? Because those things are a part of us too. And those things are important too. And those are the fun parts of life. Mm-hmm. But you don't want to get caught up in the paint, Yeah,
you don't want to get caught up in that difference, that antagonism. Yeah. I was gonna ask you, so what's the website? futurefreedom.org?
futurefreedom.community. And so we're going to be collecting stories and telling people stories. And my goal is, by the end of this year, we're going to set a date soon to have 1,000 stories of people that left the far right or other similar cult-like movements online. And so that people will see that, like, it's all different types of humans that fell into it, and it's all different types of stories. And it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be real beautiful. And then once we have developed that project to a place where we want to expand and move on, we'll start doing more of these like multimedia, kind of like hyper real art projects. And I want to bring in help from everybody. I want to bring in help from the community, because this isn't going to be about a profit thing. I want it to be a big collective effort to sort of like build something new, like all come together and kind of like maybe find a definition of truth together or something. But we're going to do media. We're going to be doing some podcasts. You'll be seeing me on YouTube more. And then I'm also going to be, whatever ideas we come up with, research ideas, products, things that could help people. We're going to turn into a way to help people. That's
so fucking awesome, dude. That is, in my mind, you guys are doing something far more important than what any online political commentator is doing, in my mind. Like, this is, I think that truly we're a little bit oversaturated in the commentary sphere, and I think creative projects like this are quite important. I like that. That's really, really cool. I'm looking forward to seeing more of what you guys do, for sure.
Yeah, someone in the comment section says, deprogramming pipeline, aren't you doing the Blanchet Contra pipeline or pipeline to break the pipeline? Here's the thing. You'll never have to think of pipeline again. No more pipeline. We'll use marketing funnels, because we got to that's pipeline is just a marketing funnel. But what you're thinking of as a pipeline, this indoctrination tunnel machine of like this Willy Wonka horror show that you want to drive me through? Nah, bro, I'm done with that shit. We're not doing no more of that. Thanks, though.
I think that, yeah, this is I think I'm further. Wow. Okay. This is interesting. I mean, like, what you guys are doing is pretty significant. And a lot of the times when I get, when I had a conversation with Pills, it was like really significant. I didn't know exactly what to say. So apologize if I don't know how to, I don't know how to respond exactly, but like, yeah, no, I think something like this is more important than the weird sectarian ideological things that we see online. Yeah. That's something that really bothers me, and it bothers me a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Some of the, and it happens all over, right? And it's not to say, I don't know, like, it's wow.
Do you ever feel forced to pick a side?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, does that cause a dissonance in you? Does it ever cause a dissonance? It causes an anxiety, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah,
for sure.
When I would try to pick a side in all this, I would think about the people on the other side, and it would literally, I felt like my brain was being torn in half. I felt like my heart, my whole essence was just being ripped, shredded. I thought about them over there, and I'd talk to them, and I liked some of them. There's this guy on YouTube who fucking hates me. He thinks I'm like, because I called him a cult leader, because he is. He's not. He needs to check himself because he'll wreck himself.
Who is it?
His name's the Distributist. I really like the guy. I think he's really smart. But like, he's caught up in the paint, just like everybody is. I understand. I'm probably caught up in it right now too, right? It's just in a different way. But like, I'd think about like people like him, or I'd think about like just right wingers I knew back home growing up. And I know you grew up in a rural area. Mm-hmm. And it would tear at my soul to think I'd have to pick a side. Yeah, that you have to, and it's not to say, and I think people misunderstand what I think someone like you or me mean. It's not to say that one side isn't more valid than the other, because we can still map validity, perhaps, right? So a Marxist, Cain, I understand,
right, like a Marxist is certainly far more is far better in almost every way than a typical fascist, right? And I think people misunderstand what people mean by that, but it's the idea of the very overly sectarian, split, atomized ways of thinking and organizing, is that you run into issues, and some people hate this because, like, oh, well, what the fuck do you do? That's a really good question, and that's not something that can be solved with doing the exact same things that we have done before. It's going to require, in my mind, collaboration and creativity, and that creativity and collaboration can only come with collaboration with other people, and again, we can't lose that love, right? That's sort of my thing. We can't lose that sort of, that natural human entanglement with one another. And man, something that's very hard to get this across the internet. It's very, very hard. I don't know what to do. It's something, and maybe I'm looking at it wrong. Maybe maybe that's an egotistical thing to think. My little fucking ego can't do anything, probably, maybe. But yeah, I do worry, and I try to think, like what to do, but I think that might be the wrong question, because I think hopefully at least sharing theory, sharing, what I do is at least helping people in ways better than what I could probably do from a commentary standpoint,
I think, honestly, I what I really like, I'd never want to tell you what to do, right?
Sure.
I used to really try to do that, and I'm starting to learn, like, really not to do that, because if I tell someone what to do, if I really like try to force them off their path, that little Donnie Darko algorithm thing in their head that's drawing them to whatever, if I try to do that, I'm going to fuck them up, and then I'm going to lose whatever information they were going to come across. Because their brain was doing a thing, and now I just screwed it up. So, I think that what I want to do is not tell people what to do, but I do. Okay, sorry. But what I would say to you is, your channel, you and the other guy, you guys do these videos where you talk about ideas, but you don't talk about them from like this heavy philosophical point of view. You do the video essay thing, and you connect them to a story, and it's really cool because it's like you're taking like new world way of learning things and you're connecting it to an old way of learning things, because that's how people used to learn, right? The stories.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And it made it so much quicker and easier for me to associate with it, and it made it relatable. And for my type of brain, I don't know, I think that what you guys are doing, like on your own right now, that's what's working, even if you're not seeing it.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you.
It's probably just not. The problem is we don't distribute. If in a nice world, you'd be plugged into a network of communities which respected your opinions, or respected like some body of opinions that you're a part of, and then they would all choose to like pull from you. But because you're out here just competing in this, I don't know, whatever this is, like, yeah, like the message doesn't get where it needs to go, and then when it does, it's all distracted and distorted. I don't know. I think like
10 minutes till 5.
Hold on.
Someone walked in. 10 minutes till 5, fellas.
So, I threw my train of thought off. It's fine.
It's all right. It's no problem.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Well, I was going to say we're probably, I'm kind of running a little bit shorter at a time. I always have an elastic time frame, but I usually like to stay around this time. But yeah, no, please. It is absolutely nothing to apologize about. This is an awesome conversation. I got to say though, before we wrap it up, I think this is a different, I didn't expect this sort of Caleb, to be honest. You seem a lot more open to a lot of things, a lot more an elastic thinker than I would have initially imagined from what I've seen online of you. Is this the most open you've been online in like a talk?
Yeah,
sort of?
I kind of had like a thing. I have I don't know, man. I had an epiphany recently. I think the way my brain works is I go around and I just like, and again, you have to be careful with everything I'm saying, is because it needs to be all like sourced and checked now, right?
Sure.
But like, I think the way my brain works is I just gobble up information because I'm obsessed with it, and I don't really know what to do with it. I just follow it because like, oh, that piece is interesting. Because I can't, when someone tells me I have to like just read a book and learn through, I don't even want to do that. That's not interesting. I don't want to do that. I'll just learn this piece of Socrates, and then I'll go listen to that lecture piece about Baudrillard, and then I'll go over here and I'll listen to a Nazi talk for an hour and see what the hell he's trying to say.
You know,
I'll do that, and like I'm starting to see like a pattern emerging.
Okay, interesting. Okay,
and I have like this synesthesia effect where the reason it's hard for me to tell you all this stuff, I see this as like shapes, I see this in like shapes and colors. So it's hard to even explain what I'm trying to explain to you, but it's been like some sort of like, imagine you had like your distributed network and you picked up all these little pieces of information and they were scattered throughout the network. But then one day, for whatever reason, the network, it's like you picked up another piece and then it lit up a node that connected all the other nodes, and then it was weird. I had like a epiphany, like series of epiphanies over the past 3 weeks.
Damn. Okay.
And those happen. Those are getting faster and faster for me.
All right. Well,
It's like an autodidactic, playful way of learning. I think that it's, and you know what? I was out on this. I'll say this last thing. I was out on the street the other night, and I used to learn this way, and then people would tell me, "Don't do that. That doesn't work. You're not doing anything." I'm like, "Well, what?" And so I was trying to like change my shape into what they needed me to be. I was out in the street the other day, and I saw this guy, and he's a black dude. He's homeless. He's on roller skates. And I said, "Nice skates, man." He said, "Thanks." And he walked up and started skating next to me, talking to me. We were just talking about stuff. He told me how he was this guy who grew up poor and he just skated his whole life. And he loved his skates. And he's the only guy in DC that's allowed to skate on Capitol Hill without a permit because he's got a waiver, because he apparently fell so many times that they got sick and tired of him. They were like, "Listen, dude, just sign this waiver. You just sign this waiver. You can skate on Capitol Hill, but if you fall, that's on you." And so he's the only guy, that's allowed to skate on Capitol Hill without a waiver, without a permit. And he had this job where he delivered newspapers and press releases, make all this money in a day, just skating around. He took all that money, and the only reason he skates because that was his passion. That was what he loved to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then he used his passion to build himself a little empire. And he built this little empire, like real estate and all this stuff, and jobs and nonprofits to try to help people. And then he said that he was trying to do this nonprofit where they were going to go to Vietnam and dig up all these bombs and deal with them, and fucking got put on a terrorist watch list. And I'm sure they saw he was a black man. I'm sure he had his fucking apartments and his money in ways, in weird ways.
Yeah.
And he went to jail for 36 years.
What?
He got out, and I think he must have got out recently. And he's on them skates, and he's like, "Yeah," he's like, "They brought me out them skates," and he's like, and then they put some lighter bearings in them. He said, "But I'm trying to get me some geeks." I'm like, "Why?" He said, "Well," he says, "I'm gonna skate across the country. I'm gonna roller skate across the country." And I said, "Yeah?" And he said, "Yeah, I think I can do it in 30 days. I said, "Okay." He's like, "Well, what?" I was like, "Well, how are you gonna do it?" He's like, "Well, I already know everything I need." He said, "Listen," he's like, "I've been doing this for over 36 years. I've been, he's like, I've skate. I always skate." He's like, "I love skating." He said, I need me skates that have this specification. This would be this light, and then you do this, and then I need a suit. I want a suit that's like completely automated, because he says it needs to be temperature controlled, against radiation and heat and light, and keep me cool and fit and agile. He says, he's like, I got to be moving fast. If I got to be able to take calls, I got to be able to see things, do things. He says, I can't reach into my pocket. He said, I gotta keep going. And he said, and he said, and then I'm gonna take. He said, I see these kids. They ride these skateboards around everywhere, and I watch them, and they're these electric skateboards. He thought, he said, I bet if I do this and this. And then he's like, and I know, and he's like, I bet I could put some batteries on the skates and to get like boost. And he's like, and I know that like because I know, he's like, you skate, so you'd have to do it. And he started explaining like how you would do it. He started explaining to me how he would build a fucking super suit that allows him to skate around like Sonic the Hedgehog and make calls and fucking do goofy shit. And this guy's living out on the street. He's homeless. That's a genius fucking idea that some Silicon Valley nerd would love.
Right.
They'd dump millions and millions of dollars into that, and it'd be a big marketing campaign.
Something that is so creatively
that guy
odd.
never went to school and doesn't know how to engineer and doesn't know any of that stuff. He just always is chasing his skating.
Right. And you can come to certain conclusions that sound initially really, really fucking weird until it sort of is implemented in some facet, right? Yeah. That's interesting. That's really that's something else, man. That dude must have been a trip.
I don't know if like every little detail of his story, but yeah, I think that we are not appreciating certain people and certain intelligences, and we're just pushing them out.
150%, dude. Definitely, especially more creative intelligences. That 100%. That's something that in an overly structured sort of neoliberal world, that is not something that is we initially celebrate, right?
100%, man. Well, listen, I'm done talking. I'm gonna let you like close your thing out.
All right, dude. Well, no. It was awesome having you on. Dude, let's do it again. Dude, I'm really looking forward to you guys at the Future Freedom thing. Is there any word on when you guys are going to do something big soon, or what you guys have planned?
So, just to be very clear on what Future Freedom's doing right now, we want to help people, show people a path of where, what their life can be like. And, people can email us and talk to us and ask us questions, and we'll answer their questions. And then we are, collecting people's stories anonymously and showing them to the world so that everybody can share in those experiences and learn from each other. Future Freedom. So, and then there'll be a podcast that we're going to release soon. You can find me just basically everywhere at Faraday Speaks. If you'd like to talk to me, you can also email me at caleb@futurefreedom.com or .community or caleb@futurefreedom.community. That's also the website, futurefreedom.community. Twitter's the best place to reach me.
I'll put this in the description as well.
I appreciate it. Yeah, all of that. Yeah. So, but if anybody out there, again, I'm hive minding the problem. If you're a linear thinker, if you think you can take my crazy ideas and systematize them, if you're like me and you think you can build upon them, or if you think that like there's just some other way that we can like help people, I think we hive mind the problem, because what's right now happening is the two sides are hive minding together. The leftists are on their side, the rightists are on their side, and they're slowly destroying our environment, and soon it's not going to be very hospitable.
Yeah, so, that's a good way to end it, man. We can definitely in a couple months, if you're interested, we can set this up again. I would love to. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks. I think we should start talking more frequently.
Definitely. Yeah. Absolutely should. Well, dude, I appreciate it. I'm going to probably head on out of Discord and I'll finish up on my end. But thanks so much for coming on, dude. I really appreciate it a lot. I think what you guys are doing and the plans that you have is super fucking awesome.
Thanks, dude. Talk soon. Bye, guys.
All right. See ya.